In this video, I want to take a look at some epithelial tissues that you need to know for our first practical. If we take a look at our list here, we're starting with simple squamous epithelium. And what we're looking at in this slide is we're looking at a sample of frog skin. So for simple squamous, you can see that we've got flat, thin cells here. And that, of course, is our squamous shape. You can also see that we've got one cell thick. These look like floor tiles almost. And they're fit together really tightly, and they form a thin layer. So this is frog skin. Take a look here. We have got a few structures that you need to know. So we've got nucleus as the dark staining structure in the middle. We've got cell membrane as the outline of our cell, and then everything in between is cytoplasm. So that's all we need for simple squamous. The next tissue is stratified squamous. So let's take a look at that. Here's a nice slide of stratified squamous epithelium, and notice that we're going to be zooming in on this edge right here. So as I zoom in, you can start to see we've got lots and lots of cell layers in this epithelium right here. So right away you see lots of nuclei all stacked in here, lots of cells. But what you notice is in stratified squamous, you have nice round nuclei toward the bottom here, and they're all jam-packed together. As you move toward the edge here, you notice that these nuclei get squished. And so now they're not round anymore, they're more flattened. That's a dead giveaway that you've got stratified squamous epithelium. Take a look here, you've got lots of round nuclei toward the bottom. As you move out toward the edge, they become flattened. So that's a good sign that you're looking at stratified squamous. So you need to know nucleus, cytoplasm, cell membrane, and basement membrane. Nucleus, the dark round structures, cytoplasm, the lighter areas, and in between those two you have the cytoplasm. The basement membrane of an epithelium is where that epithelium is going to attach to deeper levels or deeper layers. And so just look for where the tissue changes in color or changes in appearance. So right here would be our basement membrane of this stratified squamous epithelium. Here's another nice example of stratified squamous epithelium. And on this slide, we've got a little bit darker staining going on here. But keep in mind that you've got your nice round clustered nuclei toward the basal side here. As you move out to the apical side, the nuclei become much thinner. So dead giveaway that we're dealing with stratified squamous. Our next tissue is simple columnar epithelium. And so here's a pretty good example of one. What you see here is you see the epithelium right here, and right away you notice this nice tight dark border right here. And the cells look kind of column-shaped. The nuclei are clustered toward the bottom. This tight dark border right here, this is called the brush border. And if you see a brush border, you're looking at simple columnar epithelium. Here you can see the dark staining structures of the nuclei. They're clustered more toward the bottom. These large light-colored structures, these are the goblet cells. And this particular epithelium was very highly active when this slide was made. So these goblet cells are really just overpowering the epithelium in their size. So let's take a look at another slide real quick. Here we have another slide of simple columnar epithelium. So let's take a closer look. And this epithelium looks a little bit more characteristic in that you have a nice row of nuclei here, and these nuclei are column-shaped. And that's going to be a good clue that this is simple columnar. The fact that they're column-shaped nuclei and the fact that they're in a nice line like this is a good sign that they're simple columnar. You can also see this nice tight border right here. This is the brush border, and it's made up of microvilli. Here you can see a goblet cell. Here you can see a goblet cell, and the goblet cells actually produce enzymes that get released onto the surface of this epithelium. So the goblet cells are always going to be opening or closely located by this apical side here. The nuclei you can see here is the darkly staining structures, and the cell membrane you can see as the outline of the cell right there. The basement membrane is going to be where the epithelium is attached to deeper tissues. So you can see one, or the one side of this villus right here, and this intestine is right here. And we've got some tissue in between, and then we've got our other side of the epithelium over here. This side doesn't look nearly as good. So that is simple columnar epithelium. Next, we've got simple cuboidal epithelium. And what we're looking at in this slide is we're looking at kidney tubules. And so each one of these round structures is really a tube that has been cut in the transverse section here, or the transverse plane. And we're going to zoom in, and what we're looking at is we're looking at the lining of the tube. So right here you can see we've got one of our tubules, and this lining right here is what we're looking at. This is simple cuboidal epithelium. And if you look at these individual cells, they're very boxy or cube-shaped. That's a good giveaway that it's cuboidal. The nuclei are clearly stained and dark in coloration in the center of the cell, and then you can also see the cell membrane as the outline of the cell. So right there is a cell, right there is a cell, right there is a cell. It's pretty straightforward. For the basement membrane, just like any epithelium, this is where the epithelium is attached to deeper tissues. And just look at where the tissue is changing in coloration or appearance. Here is our basement membrane around this simple cuboidal epithelium. Here it is over here. So let's take a look at another slide real quick. On this slide, you can see pretty clearly that we're looking at simple cuboidal, but what you can't see on this slide is you can't really see the cell membranes. So you can clearly see that we've got a ring or a circle of simple cuboidal cells, one cell layer thick, cube-shaped, but you can't really see the cell membrane very well on this slide. Our next tissue is pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. So let's take a look over here. This is a really good slide for pseudo-stratified columnar. And what you can see right away here is you can see that we've got what looks like a lot of nuclei all jammed in here. Well, these are column-shaped cells, but unlike the simple columnar, which had basically a nice row of nuclei going across, here you have nuclei at multiple different levels or layers. And it turns out that this is only one cell thick, but it appears to be multiple layers, so we call it pseudo-stratified. The easy way to tell pseudo-stratified is to look at the apical side of the epithelium, and you can see we've got this nice fuzzy border right here. This is made up of individual cilia, which are lining this epithelium. And oftentimes you will see this dark band down here, which represents the top of the cell membrane, and the cilia are hanging off of it. So if you see this fuzzy ciliated border, you definitely have pseudo-stratified columnar. Compare that to simple columnar, where you have a real tight border. You don't have this furry border. Here you can see we've got goblet cells, and these are staining or not staining as a light coloration here, here, down in here as well. There's a goblet cell. Nuclei are darkly staining. Cell membrane you can't really see too well. The basement membrane is where the epithelium is attached to deeper tissues. So right there's your basement membrane. Here's another slide of pseudo-stratified columnar. And again, what we see here is we see the epithelium right here, and we see what looks to be multiple layers of nuclei jam-packed in there. We see this dark band right here, and then we see a bunch of cilia or a fuzzy or furry border. And that's a dead giveaway that we're dealing with pseudo-stratified columnar. So again, the nuclei look like they're in multiple layers, even though they're not, and you see these cilia. If you see cilia, you're looking at pseudo-stratified columnar. Our last epithelial tissue is transitional epithelium. And what we're looking at here is a section of bladder. So we want to zoom in on the epithelium, and we can start to see it. So here we are, And if you notice right away, you'll see lots of cells thick here, and this looks very much like stratified squamous. But take a look at these nuclei. They're round down at the bottom, but they seem to be clustered. They're not really clustered at the bottom. They seem to be just uniformly distributed throughout the epithelium. Focus in on the outer layers here. These nuclei are all rounded, and as opposed to stratified squamous, where when you get to the outer edge here, the nuclei become flattened. So that's a dead giveaway that you've got transitional epithelium. Here's another slide of transitional epithelium. In this slide, you can also see that character here, or diagnostic characteristic. You've got lots of nuclei throughout this tissue, but as you get to the top side here, the apical side, the nuclei are still rounded. And so you definitely know that you're dealing with transitional epithelium at this point. See how rounded these nuclei are at the apical side? Okay, so I hope that is helpful for you for learning epithelia.